Are you ready for the word? Turn to Genesis 14. Look at verse 17. And the king of Sodom, whose name was Bera, B-E-R-A, the king of Sodom went out to meet Abram after his return from the slaughter of Kedorlaomer and of the kings that were with him at the valley of Shaveh, which is the king's dale. And Mechizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God. In Hebrew it says he was the priest of Elion El. Elion means the supreme one or the most high one. So that's the reason you see the most high there. Elion means the most high one, and El means one of great strength or power. So Melchizedek was the priest of the most high one who possesses great strength and power. Verse 19, and he blessed him and said, blessed be Abram of the Most High One who has great strength and power, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be Elion El, which has delivered your enemies into your hand. And he, Abram, gave him, Melchizedek, tithes of all. And the king of Sodom said unto Abram, give me the persons and take the goods to yourself. And Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted up my hand unto Yahweh, Elion El, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from a thread even to a shoe latchet, and that I will not take anything that is yours, lest you should say, I have made Abram rich. Save only that which the young men have eaten, and the portion of the men which went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their portion. Well, we're going to deal with two things this morning before we close out chapter 14 and move on to chapter 15. The two things we're going to deal with is, number one, the subject of the tithe, because it's mentioned here. What is it and why did Abram give a tithe to Melchizedek? Number two, we're going to deal with the subject of Melchizedek. Just who was he and why is he significant? So let's go ahead and deal with the hard one first. Let's deal with the tithe. I've said this before, and I think it bears repeating, that I find it to be perplexing that mainstream denominations believe the law passed away, and yet they teach and preach that people ought to tithe. And what's even more perplexing than that is the people seem to have no problem with that. They believe the law passed away, but they believe they ought to also tithe. And then you couple that with the fact that the Hebrew roots groups believe that we ought to keep Torah, but most or many of them teach that people don't have to tithe anymore. Because there's no temple, etc., no priesthood, so on and so forth. So they don't believe we're any longer obligated to tithe. Well, that's just one example of how controversial the subject of tithing can be and is. So, if you look at our text, you'll see that it has been making some people angry for a long, long time. Tithing has. The king of Sodom had lost everything. He had lost all his people. He had lost all his goods. We went over this last week. Abraham, with the power of the Most High, went and retrieved it all. And when he was returning from battle, Bera, the king of Sodom, was the first person to meet him. No doubt he was hoping that Abraham would greet him and say, here's your people and here's your stuff. But Abram didn't say that. The next person that meets Abram is Melchizedek. Melchizedek brings him bread and wine, and then blesses him, and then blesses Yahweh. That is, he began to vocalize praises and congratulations to Abram, and praises and congratulations to Yahweh. When he was finished blessing Abram and Yahweh, Abram gave him tithes of what? Tithes of all. Everything. And that angered Bera. It's evident that he was angered by his response. From his response, we can see that he was irritated and upset at what Abram had done. Read it again, verse 21. And the king of Sodom said unto Abram, give me the persons, take the goods to yourself. First of all, he had no right to demand anything of Abram. You agree? Yes. Abram had not been contracted by him to go get anything. Abram had not been hired to go fight a war. Abram and Bera had no covenant. So Abram was not obligated in any way to go do what he did. And we know that when Abram had gone to battle against these 4 kings and had won, to the victor, what? Goes the spoils. The people and the goods belong to Abram. But the king of Sodom is under some kind of delusion and self-deception that Abram is obligated to give them back to him. But when Abram starts tithing off of all of it, he gets this idea, well, he's not going to give me back any of it. And so he said to Abram, give me the people and keep the goods for yourself. Do you remember what we said last week the word keep means? It means to seize something against the will of the other person. To seize it against their will. To take it away from them. And so the king of Sodom was saying, give me the people and you go ahead and take my stuff if you have to. That's what he's saying. It's to be noted that Bera, the king of Sodom, did not say one thing to Abram until he tithed. He was the first one to meet him. He did not say thank you. He did not start praising Yahweh that all the people and all the goods are safe in returning. When Melchizedek started blessing Abram and blessing Yahweh, he didn't join in. He got a bad attitude. That would have been a great time for him to thank Abraham and to thank Yahweh. But he never said one word to Abram pay the tithe. And that really got him angry. All he can focus on is Abram being in possession of goods that he thinks still belong to him, and Abram thinking that he's got a right to tithe it. Well, how did Abram respond? Abram said, I've lifted up my hand to Yahweh and said that I'll not keep 1 red cent of anything that's yours. Break that down and consider this. His words are past tense. And that means that after the battle and before Bera ever came to meet him, after the battle, Abram's having to wrestle with this subject. He's now in possession of a lot of people and a lot of goods. And he's having to wrestle with, do I keep it or do I turn it back over? Yahweh never told him one way or the other what he had to do. Yahweh didn't say, I want you to turn it back over. Turn the people back over, turn the goods back over. Yahweh never said that. But Abram said to Yahweh, lifted his hand up and said, I'm not keeping any of this. I'm not keeping the people, and I'm not keeping the goods. We'd say, I won't keep 1 red cent. He said, shoe latchets and threads. He said, the smallest, most insignificant part of it, I'm not keeping it. And he explained that to Bera, that he had come to that decision. All right? Mark this. Abram knew that at that moment of victory, everything rightfully became his to do with as he pleased, and it pleased him to return it. Now consider this. If Abraham had decided that he wasn't going to keep any part of any of that stuff, then why didn't he just give it all back? Why did he give portions to those who went with him to battle? And why did he give a tithe to Melchizedek before he gave it back to the 5 kings? If he said, I'm not going to keep any of it, why didn't he give it all back? And the answer is simple. What belonged to him he could give back to Bera and the other 4 kings. But he could not give back what did not belong to him. And the tithe of what he possessed did not belong to him. And those who went to battle with him had a right to expect to be compensated. Their portion did not belong to him. He could not give on their behalf. What was theirs was theirs. What was Yahweh's was Yahweh's. What's left, he gave it all back. From this story, we learn 2 important things about the tithe. The tithe is a requirement put in place by Yahweh prior to it being written in the law. Number 2, everything that we earn and think that belongs to us does not belong to us. Not everything. Let's go read what is written in the book of Hebrews concerning what happened here in Genesis 14. Go to Hebrews 7. It's one of those sermons where you sometimes just have to amen yourself because you don't really expect it to come from somewhere else. Hebrews 7 verse 4. Now consider how great this man was, of whom even the patriarch Abraham gave the 10th of the spoils. Verily they that are of the sons of Levi, who receive the office of the priesthood, have a commandment to take tithes of the people according to the law, that is, of their brethren, though they came out of the loins of Abraham. But he whose descent is not counted from them received tithes of Abraham and blessed him that had the promises. So Melchizedek is not a descendant of Levi. He is not a part of the Levitical priesthood. He is not from the order of the Aaronic high priest line. But Abraham, the one who had a covenant with Yahweh and the one who had received promises from Yahweh that gives him an elevated position in a covenant with Yahweh, Abraham gave tithes to that man Melchizedek. Verse 7. And without all contradiction, he said, nobody can argue with this. The less is blessed of the better. So we elevate Abraham, he's saying, because he had a covenant with Yahweh and received promises from Yahweh. But Melchizedek blessed him. That means that Melchizedek is higher. He's the greater. He's the better than Abraham. Melchizedek is shown to be the greater by how all of this transpired. Verse 8. Here men that die receive tithes, but there he receives them, of whom it is witness that he lives. There he received them, of whom it is witness that he lives. Verse 9. And as I may so say, Levi also, who received tithes, paid tithes in Abraham. For he was yet in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him. Levi, who according to the law is supposed to receive tithes from the descendants of Abraham, was actually paying tithes with Abraham to Melchizedek. The law says Levi is to receive them. Hebrews says that Levi was actually in the loins of Abraham paying tithes to Melchizedek. The tithe was put in place by Yahweh before it was written in the law, is the point. The tithe transcends the Levitical priesthood is also the point. That is, it's not just for them in their temple duties. The tithe is Yahweh's, and he uses it to accomplish his purposes. This is shown by and through Abraham giving tithes to Melchizedek. Leviticus 27, verse 30 says this, and all the tithe of the land, whether of the seed of the land or of the fruit of the tree, is Yahweh's. It is holy unto Yahweh. I have heard many in the Hebrew roots groups, whatever you want to call them, many in the Hebrew roots refer to this in the verses that precede and follow it, saying that, since we don't grow crops anymore, and since most of us don't have herds anymore, and since there is no temple, that's the reason this doesn't apply to us anymore. But Isaiah 1:19 says that if you be willing and obedient, you shall eat what? The good of the land. And what comes out of the land? Everything comes out of the land. I was going to say it again. There's absolutely nothing that we have or enjoy that came from some other planet. No spaceship brought it here. If you got here today in a very fine automobile, if it was too fine, I apologize to you about my driveway. But if you got here today in a very fine automobile, guess where it came from? It came out of the land. You're sitting there holding laptops and tablets and cell phones. Guess where they came from? They came out of the land. Bulldozers and excavators, everything you can imagine, everything that we enjoy, the land produced it. Right? So when Yahweh says all the tithe of the land is mine, or all the tithe of the land is Yahweh's, it's referring to everything. Okay? It's not just talking about apples, oranges, okra, and soybean. Everything we have comes out of the land. All right? And if we make a living, no matter what we use to produce the income in our life, that tool came out of the land. Now that's an amazing deal when you think about it. Yahweh created this amazing place. The things that have come out of it and continue to come out of it are nothing less than miraculous. Do you agree? I mean, when I was in high school, if you'd have told me that I could have a phone that wasn't going to be plugged in somewhere and could transmit at real time a message to people all over the world, I'd have asked you what turnip truck you fell off of, because it was inconceivable that such a thing could happen. This place that Yahweh has created, and what can and does come out of it, is nothing less than miraculous. Only an Elion El could create a place that from it, those created in his image could create things for themselves. Do you get that? Only an Elion El could create a place and then put in that place people created in his own image who could take this place and create things for themselves. We take trees and make tables and chairs and desks. We take seeds, produce vegetables out of it. We take the soil and the minerals and produce fuels and steel and cars and dozers and phones and computers. Only an Elion El could do such a thing. And all Yahweh says is, you've got free access to this amazing place I created. Free access. Go out there in it and produce all of the increase that you desire. Let it yield its increase to you. All I ask is that everything you reap out of it, understand that 10% of it belongs to me, because I have work to do in the earth to establish my kingdom. You return 10% back to me. That's a deal. True. Think about this. We know that Abram paid tithes of all, but what else did he do with all of the goods? What did he do before he turned them back over to the kings? Thank you. He made sure that those who went with him were compensated. It's a pattern that we need to pay heed to. Abram was insistent that those men be taken care of. And he didn't want Bera to be in charge of doing that. He didn't give the money back to Bera and say, hey, I'm giving it all back. All I ask is that you pay these men that went and fought in this battle. No. He wouldn't do it. He was insistent that he himself compensate those that served him in battle. He took care of his servants, then he gave Bera back his goods. Yahweh's the same way. Yahweh does not put upon us the responsibility of taking care of his servants. And anybody that thinks that they have that responsibility is deluded. Yahweh says, you give me the tithe, I'll take care of my servants myself. You give me the tithe, I take care of them, you keep the rest. You see the pattern? Though there's much more that can be said on this, we will quote Forrest Gump right here and say, that's all I'm going to say about that. We're going to move on. Let's talk about the subject of Melchizedek for a moment. His name comes from two Hebrew words. Melech means king and Zedek means righteous. So Melchizedek means the king of righteousness. Turn to Hebrews 7 for just a moment. Hebrews 7 verse 1. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of Elionel, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings, and blessed him. To whom also Abraham gave a tenth part of all, first being by interpretation, king of righteousness. We just said that. And after that also, king of Salem, which is king of peace. So Hebrews wants to make sure we know who this Melchizedek is. He is the king of peace. He is the king of righteousness. And then verse 1 says he is the priest of Elionel. That makes him far different and far superior to the Levitical priesthood. The Levitical priest could not fulfill all of those roles. King of righteousness, king of peace, and the priest of Elionel. In Jacob, a different priesthood was established. From Jacob, a different priesthood was established. In Torah, we find that Jacob's son Levi would become the line through which all priests would come. And then that gets narrowed down so that it's from not only from Levi that all the priests will come, but from Aaron, all of the high priests will come. All right? Only those who are descendants of Levi could serve as priests, and the descendants of Aaron serve as high priests. Jacob's son Judah would become the line from which the kings would come. Only those who were descendants of Judah could reign as king. And that got narrowed down to where they had to come from what line? David. Right. So, no king gets allowed to serve as priest because he's not from the line of Levi. Saul tried. Saul tried to do both. It cost him his throne. No priest could serve as the king. Any attempt by either of them to do that, for the king to serve as priest or the priest to serve as king, would mean that they were presenting themselves to the people to be the Messiah. That's the reason Yahweh came down so hard on Saul. Only the Messiah could possibly serve in both capacities. The Messiah would be the king of righteousness, and he would be the priest of Elionel after the order of Melchizedek. Not after Levi, not after Aaron. His priestly order would be higher and superior to that priesthood. Hebrews 7 verse 15. And it is yet far more evident, for that after the similitude of Melchizedek, there arises another priest, who is made not after the law of a carnal commandment, but after the power of an endless life. His priesthood is not established in the book of Numbers or the book of Leviticus. His priesthood was established by an oath from Yahweh himself. Hebrews 7 verse 23. And they truly were many priests, because they were not suffered to continue by reason of death. There were many priests because they kept dying off. And when they die off, another would have to take their place. But this man, because he continues ever, speaking of Yeshua, has an unchangeable priesthood. Wherefore he is able also to save them to the uttermost that come unto Yahweh by him, seeing he ever lives to make intercession for them. For such a high priest became us, who is holy, harmless, undefiled, separate from sinners, made higher than the heavens, who needs not daily as those high priests to offer up sacrifice, first for his own sins and then for the people's. For this he did once when he offered up himself. For the law makes men high priests which have infirmity. The law made the descendants of Aaron high priests, but none of them were perfect. But the word of the oath, which was since the law, makes the Son, who is consecrated forevermore. Yeshua has become our high priest after the order of Melchizedek. So Melchizedek is a pattern showing us the dual role of the Messiah. He is at the same time the high priest of Elionel and the king of righteousness. He lives forevermore. Hebrews 5:4 makes a very important point about being a high priest. It says that no man takes this honor unto himself, but he that is called of Yahweh. So unless you're appointed by Yahweh, you cannot be the high priest. Melchizedek was the high priest of Elionel. He did not appoint himself to that office. Aaron became the high priest of Yahweh in a different order, but he did not appoint himself to that office. Yeshua is now a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. He did not appoint himself to that order. Yahweh himself appointed him to that order. The prophecies found in Psalm 110, and we would not do justice to a discussion of Melchizedek without reading that. So Psalm 110 verse 1. Yahweh said unto my Lord. You'll see the Lord said unto my Lord in King James Version. The first, the Lord, is the tetragrammaton. It is the proper name of Yahweh. Yahweh said unto Adon, or Adonai, Adon, which is translated my Lord, and that word means master. So Yahweh said unto my master, or my sovereign one, sit thou at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. Yahweh shall send the rod of your strength out of Zion. Rule thou in the midst of your enemies. Your people shall be willing in the day of your power, in the beauties of holiness from the womb of the morning. You have the dew of your youth. Yahweh has sworn, and he will not repent. You, speaking of the Messiah, are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Adon, the Lord, my master, at your right hand shall strike through the kings in the day of his wrath. He shall judge among the heathen. He shall fill the places with the dead bodies. He shall wound the heads over many countries. He shall drink of the brook in the way. Therefore shall he lift up his head. We were talking this morning about that there's not a hippie Messiah, this free-loving, gentle thing. Not the Messiah that most denominations present. Listen to this description of him. Make no mistake about it that when he returns, he's not going to return for a group hug. Right. He's coming to rid the earth of all of the enemies of Yahweh. Amen. Yahweh will make his enemies his footstool. He's coming. He shall fill the places with the dead bodies. He shall wound the heads over many countries. That's the Messiah that is returning. Here's the point that the Bible repeatedly makes about Yeshua. In Matthew, it is revealed that he is clearly a descendant of King David. He's often called the son of David. And he's therefore the rightful king. And at his baptism, there was Yahweh's voice that came out of the heavens that said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." And then the Ruach HaKodesh sat upon him in the form of a dove. So he was the king, and now he's appointed by Yahweh to be priest. By an oath, Yahweh makes him the priest. Not after the order of Aaron or Levi. That would be impossible and that would be illegal. But he's made a priest of the order of Melchizedek, as prophesied in Psalm 110 and as is quoted in Hebrews 5:10. You will sometimes hear people say that Melchizedek was a pre-incarnate appearance of Yeshua. That's not what the scriptures teach. Let's look at it and we'll bring this to a close. Hebrews 7 says, "For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High, Elionel, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him." This Melchizedek. So he's a real person in Abraham's day, serving as a king and a priest, to whom also Abraham gave a tenth part of all, first being by interpretation king of righteousness, and after that also king of Salem, which is king of peace. Here's where people start saying it is a pre-incarnate appearance of Yeshua. He's without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto the Son of Yahweh, abides a priest forever. Made like the Son of Yahweh, not was the Son of Yahweh. Made like him. Let's consider what is meant by without father, without mother, without descent. What could that possibly mean? Does it mean he didn't have a father and didn't have a mother? Absolutely not. To be a Levitical priest, you had to have been born in the lineage of Levi. To be a high priest, you had to have been born in the lineage of Aaron. Melchizedek was Yahweh's high priest. His lineage is not tied to Aaron or Levi in any way. Without descent means that his birth is not recorded with a particular lineage. And without a beginning of time means we don't know when he started being Yahweh's priest. We have no idea. And his priestly order did not stop at his death. His priesthood did, but his priestly order did not stop at his death. Verse 6 says, "But he whose descent is not counted from them receives tithes of Abraham and blessed him that had the promises." So what Hebrews 7:6 is telling us is his descent, where he came from, is not counted from them that receive tithes. It's not connected to Levi in any way. But that doesn't mean that he just appeared out of nowhere with no mother or father. It just means that his mother and father are not listed because it is irrelevant to his position. He's not a Levitical priest. All that Hebrews wants us to know is that Melchizedek cannot be tied to Aaron in any way or Levi in any way, but that he still has been appointed a high priest by Yahweh. Likewise, it's perfectly clear that Yeshua is a descendant of David. He was not a descendant in any way of Aaron. Yet, Yahweh by an oath has made him a high priest forever. Because he lives forevermore. He is forever Yahweh's high priest. He is forever our high priest. So, I'm going to close with this, reminding you that Yahweh always works through patterns. So let's not miss the pattern. Melchizedek blessed Abraham and blessed Yahweh. So what does our high priest do? He blesses the descendants of Abraham, the children of Abraham, which we are. And he blesses Yahweh. That's what one after the order of Melchizedek does. He blesses those who are of Abraham, and he blesses Yahweh. Abraham paid tithes of all to Melchizedek. The pattern is, likewise, the children of Abraham continue to pay tithes to their high priest, Yeshua. Yeshua, a high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek, in order to support or promote his work. It's as simple as that. Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yahweh lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace, as his name is put upon you. He said, put it on you. He said, if you'll put my name on them, I will bless them. So shall you be blessed.